Guys, welcome back to Real Time. Now today's review is going to play out a little bit differently. Now as you know, if you've been following my channel, you know that I'm usually not in the habit of giving away spoilers. And I do this because while some of these movies might be old hat to me, I realize that there are those of you out there who may not have always seen what I'm about to review. And while I, and maybe some of your friends might rag on you for admitting it, there's really nothing wrong with never having seen a classic. I find myself discovering them all the time, even still. So really, just don't feel bad about it. Now that being said, I do believe that there are those select few that you can talk about where spoiling really isn't that big of a deal because, well, the plot isn't exactly the star of the film, if you catch my drift. And one such example is Die Hard 2, Die Harder. Now I want to go on record first by saying that I absolutely love the first Die Hard film. It's a genuine action classic, and I would highly recommend watching it before checking out this one, because as I've said before, I'm a firm believer that most series should be watched in order, and I feel like this series is a good example of why. The first film really does set up and establish the character of John McClane, and that's something you want to be ready for, because let me tell you, this film is going to assume that you saw the first entry. It makes a lot of references to the first film. So if you really want to appreciate this film for all it's worth, you want to go into it having seen the first Die Hard. Now if you haven't seen this movie, be warned again that I'm pretty much going to spoil the whole thing for you here. Yeah, I wouldn't be offering spoilers if this were a review for the first film, because I feel like that is an experience for its plot. This one really isn't, and it's much more of a conversation piece because while I do like this movie, I can also admit it's pretty ridiculous. So be prepared for spoilers if that matters to you, but if not, prepare to take a ride with me as your guide into Die Hard 2, Die Harder, directed by Renny Harlin and starring Bruce Willis. The movie opens with John McClane getting towed at the airport by Arnold's pal Harry from Total Recall.
Harry, how was your trip to Mars?
I wouldn't trust him, John.
You bland quake!
McClane is waiting for his wife Holly to arrive with her flight from Los Angeles, and apparently, being a cop, he can't understand that you're not supposed to park directly outside of the airport and leave your vehicle unattended.
So ask Santa Claus to give you another car. Merry Christmas, pal.
Oh, and it's Christmas. Ah, and a beeper. That's cute. They introduce us briefly to General Esperanza, a drug lord slash tyrant who will be playing into the story later. Then we get introduced to... wait, that's Haywood from Shawshank Redemption! And he's... naked. Really naked. Don't look into that mirror during this scene, everyone. Ugh. So again, John's wife is on a plane, and if you don't need me to remind you that it's 1990, the screenplay sure will.
It's the 90s, remember? Microchips, microwaves, faxes.
Hey, I see Grandma's catching up on her 80s buddy cop reading. So back on the ground, John McClane and Naked Haywood run into each other. The irony. Some shady characters show up at an old church, and we meet a guy who says this.
Kind of feel like a piece of me is dying along with this church.
Wait for it.
Oh, you're right about that.
This is Buckwheat. The clubhouse is open.
So we got some bad guys planning some bad stuff in this airport, and John's starting to pick up on it. Trouble is that Harry isn't going to listen, so it's up to John to investigate. He follows the bad guys into a baggage area with a bunch of conveyor belts, and it's definitely not going to be an action movie set piece. What ensues is our first gunfight of the film that abides by action movie logic in spectacular fashion. Seriously, all of these guns are going off and nobody outside can hear it.
That's right!
We also have some marvelous editing that showcases some stunt doubles pretty well. Then we get this slice of gold. Ah, but the cops do show up, only to hold up the wrong guy. Next, we're back on the plane, and hey, isn't that Dickless from Ghostbusters?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Well, apparently he hasn't changed much since then. Seriously, his name is even still Dick.
Where's Cochran? He didn't make it. Oh, man.
Did he lose a partner or drop an ice cream cone just now?
Oh, man.
So we get some character moments from Naked Haywood, who's actually kind of a jerk to his men. After that, we get to be introduced to the angry police chief Lorenzo, who's really mad at John.
I got a f***ing reindeer flying in here from the f***ing petting zoo.
Oh, and it's Christmas. Next, we get another lesson in action movie logic. The hero can do whatever he wants. Did he even flash a badge? He didn't. We then get reintroduced to the general from earlier, who appears to be held captive in a plane. And now we get Carl Winslow and his Twinkies. God, I miss Family Matters. Now John is back with the cute airline girl he stole from, and she lets him use her fax machine. Seriously, since we met her, he stole from her desk, held up her line, and made her listen to an entire phone call of his. And yet she swoons. We get an update on the plane, and, well, this is boring. Let's see how things are going down at the airport.
Al?
Anyway, John gets his fax, and he has some inside information on who they might be dealing with.
The ghost of Christmas past.
Oh, and it's Christmas. He then encounters a news reporter whom we'll get more familiar with later. So just when John's able to pass this information to the authorities, who of course don't believe him, Naked Haywood strikes and shuts down the lights on the runways, as well as their communications with the airlines overhead. Which admittedly is a serious matter that builds some actual tension, since there's a blizzard going on and the planes aren't able to be rerouted. Naked Haywood calls and tells the authorities that he's ordering they allow the cargo plane holding the general to land so that they can work out their evil schemes, and if they do not cooperate, he will inflict serious penalties on them. With the airplanes flying blind and deaf overhead, again, this is a real threat. McClane intends to intervene, but the angry chief gets in the way because he doesn't want McClane's interference, even if he has been right about everything up to this point. He has John escorted out and calls in his own team.
Now, would you get your thumb out of your get him out of the elevator, or you're gonna find a pink slip in your Christmas stocking.
Oh, and it's Christmas.
Then the movie really shows its hand.
Another basement, another elevator. How could the same shit happen to the same guy twice?
That's funny. I was kind of thinking the same thing just now. Then we meet Marvin, the janitor, who's going to help in some way. Marvin tells John how to get to the skywalk through the vents.
Like a regular, normal Christmas.
Thank you, John. What day was it again? I forgot. We now see what the authorities are up to. They're trying to get a technician over to re-establish contact, when suddenly, young Robert Patrick, the T-1000 himself, and he's brought reinforcements. Our next gunfight ensues, and okay, yeah, this one is pretty cool. But when the baddies win, why didn't T-1000 kill the technician when he had the chance? Oh yeah, action movie logic. John busts onto the scene and rolls on the floor shooting, and then this happens. John wins the fight, and when the comm tower is destroyed, he realizes they've lost time.
Time we don't have. Jerk us off.
Nice, John. Nothing says drama like jerk us off. Back on the plane, Dick and John's wife notice that the planes are flying very close together.
Looks like a regular traffic jam.
And on the ground, Colonel Naked Haywood calls the tower and tells them that they've made a mistake of not cooperating.
Now you're gonna pay the penalty.
What happens next is actually pretty terrible and very well executed. The colonel contacts an airplane overhead and tells them to land, but he's relayed inaccurate ground coordinates, which will result in the plane crashing. We see shots of the plane inside and see children and elderly civilians amongst them. This gives a lot of gravity to the situation, and John goes out and tries to warn them, but he is unsuccessful. The plane crashes, killing all of the passengers. This scene is actually very intense and effective, but it's also really smart, because we've already had John to be built up into this hero from the first film, and all of the other characters know him as such. Using this sequence really goes far in breaking our hero so that he can be built up again through the course of the movie, and now we have reason to root for him. So the passengers in the air become suspicious and old Dick starts investigating. On the ground they bring in the CT team. CT, like counter-terrorist unit? Wait, but that's not Jack Bauer, so who's this guy? Apparently he knows Naked Haywood.
You see, I served with him. I taught him everything he knows.
Well, maybe he's learned a few more things since then.
Well, if he's not Jack Bauer, and he knows Naked Haywood, and he won't let John in on the situation, he's gotta be a bad guy. Meanwhile, Dick has figured out what's going on and reminds us how serious it is by breaking the fourth wall?
My God.
Naked Haywood contacts the General's plane, and the General breaks loose. Apparently they counted on the General breaking himself free and landing the plane on his own.
That seems awfully convenient.
Luckily, John has patched himself into their frequency and intends to get the drop on them. After a terrible transparent plane effect, the plane lands and...
Freedom.
Not yet.
So then John lets us in on his plan.
You see, you're one of the bad guys, and now that I got your sorry I'm gonna trade it for my wife.
Trouble is that Naked Haywood is hot on his heels. I guess that church he was in a minute ago is very close to the airport. McClane is trapped in the cargo plane, and the General and Haywood attack with like a dozen Acme grenades with the longest fuses ever. Does it really take that many grenades to kill a guy? Naturally, John escapes by ejecting out of the airplane, and of all the countless one-liners, this next one's gotta be the most forced.
Where's the f***ing door?
When we get back to McClane, we get some more strife between him and the authorities.
We're here to jerk off that until he tries to take off. Period.
Jerk us off again? Seriously? John then finds out where the church is that the bad guys are working out of. He tries to report this, but the soldiers, who are probably not working with Naked Haywood, get to the report first. Meanwhile, John gets in a fight with one of the guards and ice picks him in the eye. After that, the Major yells at the angry police chief, and for some reason this makes him less of a suspect to John. We see Naked Haywood's men preparing their weapons with some strange clips, and our next gunfight ensues. And yet nobody is dying. So Naked Haywood and his men escape on snowmobiles. Yeah, you heard me right. I mean, if this is all going to take place in snowy conditions, we've got to have a snowmobile chase, right? Which we do, and Naked Haywood switches his clips for different clips. And then John figures it out. The blue clips are blanks, and the red ones are live. Naked Haywood and the Major are probably in cahoots. Then we see the Major in a truck, and he kills one of his own men. Naked Haywood and the Major are definitely in cahoots. Back in the air, Dick blows the whistle on the whole situation to the press. On the ground, John informs the police chief that the bad guys are bad by... This actually works and gets the angry chief on our side.
Are you nuts? That firefight at the house...
Sideshow to jerk us off. Buy him some time.
Again with the jerk-us-off. What is it with the jerk-us-off?
It's time to kick ass.
So John's wife on the plane is planning to tase Dick, which at this point we're all praying for.
Amen to that.
At last, all the bad guys are in place, and they're surprisingly very friendly with each other. They all get on a plane, and John chases them in a news chopper. When the pilot can't risk blocking the plane, John suggests flying over top of it. Well, take it away, action movie logic. John jumps out onto the wing of the plane, and you guessed it, he fights the bad guys out on it. First the Major, who goes out in glorious fashion, while Naked Haywood just watches. Still though, we get this. Finally, John McClane faces off against Haywood's Naked Ninja style that ends with John opening the fuel tank of the plane and falling out onto the runway. Wait, are they gonna... Please tell me they're gonna... Oh, they're gonna...
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
fire from the explosion serves as a landing light for the planes, and we get a terrible musical number for the planes landing. Seriously, I know it's a happy ending, but you don't have to beat me over the head with it.
They used the f***ing pharmacy!
So Mrs. McClane asks,
why does this keep happening to us?
and the police chief, formerly angry, reminds us one last time.
It's Christmas!
Die Hard 2 is rated R for intense situations, strong language, violence, and partial nudity. So that's Die Hard 2. Is it as good as the first Die Hard film? No, but is it still entertaining? I mean, it passes as an action film, and yes, there is still plenty you can criticize about it, but it gets the job done. Bruce Willis is still loads of fun to watch, even with him dropping one-liners every other minute. I am giving Die Hard 2, Die Harder, a 2.5 out of 5.
That concludes our object lesson for this evening.
Guys, this was a lot of fun. I hope you liked this spoiler review, and if you did, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll consider making more of them in the future. I know I've got at least one more in store for you this year, so you can look forward to that. Thank you again so much for watching, and if you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe. You are on Real Time with Joe.